Now, the museum we're in today is currently preserving the first rail yard in the state of Georgia. It was built by the state's most successful railroad company to date. That company was the Central of Georgia Railway, founded in 1833 by former Mayor William Washington Gordon. And if you don't know who that is perfectly fine. He is not the most famous person in his family. That honor goes to his granddaughter, the founder of the Girl Scouts, Juliette Gordon Low. Even before there was a rail yard here, this ground was historically important because, believe it or not, we're also on top of a Revolutionary War battlefield. On this ground, on October 9, 1779, one of the fiercest battles in the Revolution and one of the worst American defeats in the war took place here. The Battle of Savannah only lasted 55 minutes. At that battle's end, the conservative count of casualties stated that the Americans and French lost a total of 800 soldiers, whereas the British only lost 50 of their number. But the rest of the details of the battle aren't very important to the tour. If you'd like to learn more about the Battle of Savannah, we have the Memorial Park right outside the museum commemorating the fallen, and across the street, the History Museum has a lovely exhibit. What's important for this tour about the battle is that it was more than just the Americans and French fighting the British here. Alongside the French helping out the Continental Army were soldiers from parts of the world that we would know today as Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Ireland, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Germany, Poland, and Lithuania. They were all here to help us try and retake this city from the British. Now, decades after the Battle of Savannah took place, upon the very ground where the worst of the fighting happened, the railroad was given 25 acres of land by the city. This property stretched from Turner Street, where that glass tower is on my right, all the way to Jump Street, which is the road on the other side of our facility on my left. It took 19 years to build this facility, from 1834 to 1855. And at the same time, the railroad was also building a 200-mile-long line of railroad track to connect Savannah to the city of Macon to our northwest. Now, in just a few moments, we are going to begin to roll onto our turntable. Now, our turntable here is one of 16 historic functioning turntables left in the United States. It's 85 feet long, all powered by electricity, has been here now for 103 years. It's also the fourth turntable to ever be here. Now, the first turntable that was here in 1852 was about 30 feet shorter than the one we have now, and the original was spun by hand. But not with a crank. There was a pole on each end of the table that men had to push. Now, that original table was so well balanced that with a train on top, you only needed one man on each pole to spin the table. This current platform is so well balanced that with 50 tons of train on it, it is going to spin using two electric engines that are 7 horsepower each. Meaning right now, either at home or at your local hardware store, there is a lawnmower with more horsepower than what's going to spin us in just a few moments. And once we begin to spin, that's where things will get tricky. Because if you look at the rim of the table, there are no fasteners, hooks, locks, or latches that connect to the tracks we're resting on now to the tracks outside. If those rams are recognized by the person looking at this table, there's a good chance that the train will jump the tracks and will move very quickly after that. The only thing stopping that from happening is Anna, our children. Let me reassure you that Adam is a master of an ancient mysterious art called eyeballing. He knows exactly where the rail should be at all section of the rail yard up to 1,000 employees working 12-hour shifts every single day. Now, in general, working for any railroad company 100 years ago was highly prized. The unions were in full swing, so your benefits and pension was exceptional. And overall, the weekly paycheck here on site was nothing to scoff at. A blacksmith helper's 22 cents an hour wage would have the same buying power as $17 an hour does today. And a journeyman blacksmith or machinist's 85 cents an hour would be the equivalent of earning a 150 grand salary in today's money. Now, with an increase in workers, there was an increase in workplace injuries. And in reaction to this, the railroad established a state-of-the-art 80-bed hospital on Bull Street to tend to them. And with the cooperation of some of the earliest Boilermaker Union locals in the country here in Savannah, the railroad also established a retirement home for their aging employees. And that building still stands today. It's now the admissions building for the Oakland Island Wildlife Center, halfway towards Tybee Island. Now, the paint shop that we're heading towards now was one of the busiest spots on site. Its 50,000 square foot work floor was designed to hold 32 train cars at all times. And today the building is home to the majority of our projects, including 2 Australian trolleys, 9 train cars, a 1937 Model 15 for a railroad crane, which you can see in the leftmost open door. And behind it, deeper into the building, are 2 vintage Ford cars, a 1926 Ford Model T and 1929 Ford Model A that our engineer Eric maintains for us here at the facility. Now, as we get close to the door, this is one of those times where brick and concrete will pass within arm's reach of the car. So for your safety, please keep all body parts inside the window sills as we enter. As we cross this threshold, I'd like us all to imagine that we are here 100 years ago. If we were here after 1925, we would see dozens of people working on this floor, painting or removing paint on countless train cars entering and exiting this building at all hours every single day. All the activity that was going on this floor equaled half of what was going on in the building, because there were workers in the basement below us. The basement, which is just as big as this room, was where people would be testing diesel engines, making and mixing paint, repairing electronics and upholstery, as well as printing out pamphlets and paperwork for the rest of the site. This rail yard was almost entirely self-sustaining, and it was the largest rail yard in the city. So on top of the company's own train cars, it wasn't uncommon for other railroad companies to send their cars here to their rival's workshop instead of the city yard to get jobs done. And this place was also generally a 24-hour operation. So if you were in this building as a painter working the night shift, you received a benefit that the daytime painters didn't. See, when the sun went down, the company was nice enough to turn the lights on so you didn't paint in the dark. During the day, the lights were off like they are now. But as you can see, it's kind of dark in here. This isn't the greatest place to be painting train cars. 100 years ago, that wasn't an issue. During the day, the inside would be as bright as it is outside right now. This type of building is what's called a daylight factory. By design, most of, if not all of its light during the day was supposed to come directly from the sun. This was thanks to these massive double doors and massive windows that would all be open, and also thanks to the roof above our heads. Now, the roof above us is what's called a sawtooth. It's a very common design, and you will see it on buildings all over the world. Now, every sawtooth roof that you will find north of the equator will be facing the same direction. The triangles will always run north to south every time. Looking at the triangles above us, on the north side, where you see those wavy panels of metal, 100 years ago in their place would be 1/4-inch thick plates of reinforced glass, allowing natural ambient sunlight to cover the entirety of this work floor every single day without fail. Now, we still use this building today, and in fact, on this side of the room, we have 2 major projects going on. One of them is this train car on my left. This is one of our oldest cars, dating back to the year 1911. It was built in the city of Augusta for Georgia Central Railroad, not to confuse it with the Central of Georgia Railroad that used this place. Its number is 67, and you may have actually seen this car before on TV and not known it. It showed up in a Disney movie a few years back. How many of you have Disney Plus back at home? Awesome. How many of you have seen the remake of Lady and the Tramp that came out a few years ago? Oh, thank goodness it's not just me and Eric this time. So, for those of you that have Disney Plus and you haven't seen the film yet, it's overall pretty decent and it's worth the watch. But when Disney was choosing a location to make the film, they picked Savannah. And if you remember, when the Tramp first shows up, he's sitting in an old red train car and he runs around a rail yard. That train car, this rail yard, and the Tramp runs by some people in that scene that aren't actors. They're members of our railroad operations crew that Disney hired to work that scene in the yard where they work on trains every day. In fact, we have someone that was in that movie with us on the tour right now. Our engineer Eric is one of the men you see in that scene of the movie. But as impressive as this car is, it's still not our oldest. Our oldest is this one, right behind us. This is the number 2. And unfortunately, we don't know much about this car because there's very little documentation on it. We know it was built sometime between 1878 and 1884. And we know that it was built somewhere. Thank you for laughing, I appreciate that. We know it was built somewhere in Georgia, and we think it was built here, but there's no way to say for certain. But what we do know is that in 1904, it was rebuilt in the Central of Georgia rail yards in Macon, and it had some siding work done on it. And we know that because the man that did the job carved a message into the train's wood itself, saying that he had finished the job. But alongside this car and our turntable, there is one more big record we have. We are the largest, most complete collection of antebellum railroad structures in the country. And there's a lot of people that we can thank for this place being here. But the first person we can thank before all the others is General William Tecumseh Sherman for not burning this place to the ground in the Civil War. Now, from breaking ground to now, this place has been here for almost 200 years in various forms. And for something to be around for that long, it's had to almost be destroyed once or twice. The first time that happened was during Sherman's March. Now, when the South tried to leave the Union, the Central of Georgia was a big supporter. And when war broke out, the Georgia Confederate Army turned the Central into their personal supply lines. And Sherman saw this as an easy weak point. In Sherman's mind, the best way to win a war isn't to throw soldiers at the enemy in numerous battles. The best way to win is to make sure that the enemy doesn't have any food, doesn't have any medicine, and no bullets to shoot you. So, as Sherman's 63,000 men marched through Georgia, they would rob Central of Georgia trains, blow them up, and then wrap the tracks around trees, destroying a railroad that took 10 years to build in just 5 weeks. And miraculously, this site was left undamaged, and we have no idea why. But then, 100 years later, the site was almost gone for good. See, after World War II and the introduction of the highway system, the railroad began to struggle. And finally, in 1963, the Central went out of business when it was purchased by their rival, Southern Railway, in a hostile takeover. Southern Rail decided they weren't going to use any part of the repair yard. It was just going to use the passenger station for only 3 years. Then they decided they weren't going to use anything that they had gotten in Savannah, and were just going to tear it all down and sell the salvage. The demolition was so slow that preservationists caught on to what was happening and tried to put a stop to it. And finally, in 1972, the city of Savannah produced the original charter that gave the land to the Central in 1833. This contract stated that if the land wasn't being used as an active rail yard, the ownership defaults back to the city. And then, in 1976, the U.S. government named this place a National Historic Landmark. So, now this place receives all the same types of federal protections as monuments like the Statue of Liberty and national parks like Yellowstone and Yosemite, even though this place is not part of the national park system. Now, of all the things that Southern Rail was trying to salvage from this place, the one thing they wanted above all else is this large, dark brick that you see here in the roundhouse. This is a very special brick to the city, and it's called Savannah Gray. It was only made here, and the Iron Ridge clay that it's made of has only been found within Savannah's waterways. Now, the Confederate City never knew the recipe for this brick as far as we are aware, film was released and was earning all sorts of Academy Awards. In 1989, the city turned to our historical society and asked us if we would like to manage this property. And what you see around you now is 37 years of our nonprofit organization's work, maintenance, and care, keeping it all standing so that visitors like you can come here every day and learn about a place that wasn't just a center of the city's economy, but also a center of its community as well. Now, before the tour ends, there's one more thing that needs to be discussed, and it's where we're headed to next. Down past the rail switch at the end of the line ahead of us, there used to be a bridge connecting where we are now to the tracks across the street. Unfortunately, in the early 1970s, the bridge had to be destroyed. Too many 18-wheelers were getting stuck under it. Now, today, Savannah is the second biggest port on the East Coast. We're second only to New York City. And before I-16 was finished, one of the main roads out of the port for the truck drivers was down Louisville Road and under a bridge that was built 40 years before the first car was ever made. So for those big rigs to get under that bridge, the drivers would have to get out of the truck, deflate all their tires, and then reinflate them on the other side. As you can imagine, it would be frustrating. And if there's one thing a port city like Savannah doesn't want, it's frustrated truck drivers. Especially in the 60s and 70s, when Jimmy Hoffa was in charge of the truck drivers union. Now, Jimmy Hoffa, by reputation, was a very dangerous and well-connected man with very close friends in the Italian mafia. And coincidentally, for decades, Savannah was a known vacation spot and place of business for high-ranking Chicago mobsters, including the likes of Al Capone during Prohibition. So, a few years before this place became an untouchable federal landmark, when the truck drivers very nicely asked the city for help with their little bridge problem, or else it'd be an awful shame if something were to happen, Savannah very quickly got rid of the bridge for them. And now, as a result, the only way a train can get out of here now is in pieces being carried by 18-wheeler trucks. And if that's not irony, I don't know what is. But the irony continues, because you see that bridge down on the intersection in front of us. That's another rail bridge from the 1850s, and that is now part of, it's protected along with the site. And there are now signs and flashing lights down there warning people that the tunnel under the bridge is only 12 feet tall. That's about a foot and a half shorter than most 18-wheelers. And there are now scratches inside that tunnel from all the trucks that have gotten caught under it over the years, either because their GPS led them underneath it or they didn't see the sign. Last time I know that happened was around 3 months ago. I know that because I was stuck behind it that morning and it made me late for work. First time I saw it happen, though, I was on this train giving a tour, and as I was talking about the scratches in the tunnel, right on cue, mid-sentence, a truck barreled down the street and got stuck in the bridge right in front of us. Thankfully, nobody got hurt, and the truck was able to back up and continue on its way with very little damage. If I'm being honest, I couldn't have planned it any better for my tour, even if I wanted to. As we're backing up towards the platform, I'd like to ask everyone to please stay seated until you hear the train's horn go off one time. That'll be our sign that we've come to a stop, and you will then be free to get up and disembark. With all that said, thank you all very much for joining us here on this ride. Please keep all heads inside the train. And we'd like to thank you all for your patronage, helping us out with this 37-year-old nonprofit project of education, maintenance, and preservation. And as we make our final approach, thank you all once again for joining us here at the Georgia State Railroad Museum. Thank you all.